Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Far Cry 4? It is the latest in the series of open-world shooters brought to you by Ubisoft, of course. This time around, we have the port brought to you by Ubisoft Kiev. This is less good. Ubisoft Kiev have had something of a checkered reputation with PC, and this would be no exception. It is not as bad as Unity when it comes to performance, but it's not exactly what I'd call amazing either. We ran into a lot of the problems when doing the port report video, and as a result, most of the performance stuff can be found there. If you want to watch that, it's in the description below this video. There's so much performance-related stuff kind of going on with that it made more sense to sort of reserve it for a separate video. Go away, thank you very much. But I'll touch on it a little bit. This is filmed with the 1.3 patch, so just bear that in mind. If they do patch it beyond that, then they may solve some of these issues, but frankly, I've waited almost a week to do my assessment of this, mostly because I just kind of haven't had the time. So I've waited about a week for it, and I think that's quite long enough. So this time around, it is set in the region of Karat, which is around the Himalayas, which is a little bit more interesting, I think, than the tropical island setting of Far Cry 3, although that's, of course, entirely subjective. You are going to be dealing with a crazy warlord. You're going to be dealing with a bunch of resistance fighters. You're going to be doing missions, and that sounds all very, very familiar, doesn't it? Well, it should. The Far Cry formula is definitely not a new one. Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 4 are in themselves extremely similar video games. Far Cry 2, that had a few different things going for it every once in a while, and a lot of those design decisions were decried by many. The way that malaria worked, the way that the checkpoints worked, the way that your weapons randomly broke. A lot of people didn't really like that. And as a result, there was a lot of hostility towards that particular game, which I think is a bit of a shame, because some of those ideas were quite interesting and sort of punishing in the way that I suppose a lot of other games in the genre really were not. Open world games generally don't tend to be all that punishing. They are very much big sandboxes in which you get to play the agent of chaos, and you also get to just mess around with a bunch of different side quests and things like that, and that's a lot of fun for a lot of people. And Far Cry 4 is really no different to that. It's very much a open-world, first-person shooter power fantasy, and there aren't all that many first-person shooter open-world titles. Not all of them go for the power fantasy side of things, by the way. You know, something like Stalker is very much kind of an open-world game in the same way that Far Cry is, but it is most assuredly not a power fantasy. Can my truck actually fit through this? Apparently it can. That's wonderful. There we go. We can just fit it through. I'm pretty sure that's not physically possible, but never mind. We're just going to ignore it because, again, open world power fantasy game, who the hell cares? But that's what Far Cry has been about for a very, very long time. And that, to me, is entirely fine. Why is it entirely fine? Well, because, well, actually, this is apparently not a outpost at all. All right, looks like we're going to have to be going in a different direction. That's a little bit unfortunate. Oh, dear. Well, I suppose we could maybe head that way. This is going to be a longer drive than I initially anticipated. We're going to have to do this in reverse. It's entirely fine for the game to be that. It's sort of what we expected. And that kind of brings me on to the first point when talking about Far Cry 4, is this game is exactly what I expected it to be. I have not at any point been surprised by this title. The additions of things like elephants and an increased reliability, I suppose, on animals to break up particular bases and distract enemies as you go in. Well, honestly, Far Cry 3 had a bit of that, and Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon... hang on, we can't get back through? Come on. There we go. And Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon had even more of that. So, really, that's not particularly new. It makes perhaps a little bit more sense in this setting. If you've got an elephant rampaging through a camp, yeah, it makes sense for that to actually happen. But if I'm looking for new game mechanics in Far Cry 4, I'm going to have to look pretty hard. I'm going to have to dig under the sofa. I'm really going to have to pull out all the stops to differentiate this from Far Cry 3 in terms of its actual game mechanics, because it doesn't really differentiate itself from Far Cry 3 with its game mechanics. It does a lot of really, really similar stuff. It's got the same sort of gunplay, to the point where there are shared animation assets between the two games. It's got the same kind of AI, in the sense that the AI will be fooled, of course, by silenced weapons. If it finds a body, it will become more alert, and it's got the good old chevrons that fill up, and then if they detect you, if there's an alarm there, they'll set off the alarm in an outpost to bring along the reinforcements, so you've got to defeat those. You get a better score if you beat the outpost by not setting those off. That sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Well, it should, because it's, well, the exact same game to Far Cry 3. You have to run around hunting different animals in order to craft different upgrades for your inventory, which means that you will start with the ability to only carry one primary. You'll eventually get the ability to carry up to 3 primaries and 1 sidearm. You need to really do that, because otherwise the game is highly frustrating. You got more ammo capacity and all that sort of thing. Yeah, this sounds like the same game. It is the same game. You've got radio towers to climb. Every single Ubisoft game this year that has an open world in it seems to have the whole radio tower thing going for it. You've got your interpretation in Watch Dogs, you've got your interpretation in Far Cry, you've got your interpretation right here. And, of course, in Assassin's Creed Unity. And Assassin's Creed Rogue, both of which came out this year. That's 4 Ubisoft games this year that used pretty much the same mechanic. Climb the radio tower, get an unlock, get some benefits. Oh, yes, and also, it will unveil the map around you for some inexplicable reason. That's the way that the game works. It's a little strange. And I think it's getting a little bit tiresome, frankly. The open world formula that Ubisoft has come up with is getting to the point where it needs something of an overhaul. I don't think there's any real doubt about that in my mind at any rate. Looks like we'll have to find another way around to actually park this bloody thing in there. It needs a little bit of an overhaul. But let's just say for a second that those games didn't exist. Let's try and detach ourselves from the idea that they do, even though, you know, they do. And it's fairly important to realize that they do. What if they didn't? What if Far Cry 3 didn't exist? You know, how would I assess this particular title? Well, I would call it amazing open world mayhem, of course. Because that's exactly what it is. Oh, it is open world mayhem. It's got decent enough first-person shooter mechanics. You know, they're not the sort of mechanics that I would describe as being Call of Duty-esque. Guns have a little bit of recoil on it, and more often than not, you're engaging at fairly long ranges, which is kind of great because it encourages better aiming. Of course, it encourages the use of scopes, sniper rifles, and things like that, and when you're using the bow and arrow, you have to compensate for drop and all sorts of things like that. It is certainly not Arma 3 level of complexity. No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But it is certainly an enjoyable first-person shooter system. The guns have a reasonable amount of kick to them. There's a reasonable amount of variety of guns. You get access to things like a handheld grenade launcher and RPG relatively early on. So that's all good stuff. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you would want in a game about chaos. And of course, the longer you go on, the more advanced weapons you get. And they've added new weapons called signature weapons this time around. I guess this is one way of getting through the gate. We just drive through it. Okay, well, this might work. The addition of signature weapons means that they can offer various variants of existing weapons with different add-ons. That's pretty much what a signature weapon is. So I can get the Warrior, which I have, which is an AK-47, which has a scope and a silencer on it. Very effective, very costly, a good way of sinking a lot of your money into things, because this game is chock full of activities, as you might imagine. It's a Far Cry game, it's a Ubisoft open world game, it's a big theme park that is chocked full of activities. There are several here. I can redo this outpost, for instance, to get higher rewards and more points. This is actually a fortress, not an outpost, but there you go. I can tear down this propaganda poster, because apparently I'm the only person in the world capable of removing offensive posters. Lord knows why that is. I can go to this radio, and I will find that there is a survival mission where I'm supposed to rescue some people from a bunch of ravenous rabid dolls. Or dowels, or whatever they're called. Yes, and I will absolutely go and do that, because why not? You know, it's something to do. You are the universal savior of Kyrat. You are the person pretty much doing all of the work almost all of the time, and for some reason, no one else seems capable of actually doing it. This is the skill tree. Well, I wouldn't say a skill tree. It's 2 urban blocks of skills. And we could grab some of those. We can grab different kinds of takedowns this time around, which is actually kind of fun once you've learned to do that. It makes the takedown a significantly more effective way of killing somebody instead of just being press F to kill. It's more of a case of press F and then you can chain it into something else. You can grab the gun of the opponent and then shoot other people with it, which is both stylish and fairly effective. Now you've got a grenade takedown here. Use their own grenade against them. These are all things that you can unlock. And some of it is gated depending on liberating 2 outposts without being detected, reach Karma level 4, and so on and so forth. But with this year, at least in my honest opinion, you're kind of just going through the motions, really. They are not particularly exciting outside of things like the knife throw takedown. I mean, come on. You can move the bodies of heavy gunners and heavy flame units. Vehicles take more damage. Aim and fire any sidearm while moving a body, which is an extremely rare situation where you would actually have to do that. A lot of these are kind of dull, outside of the ride an elephant. You know, that's awesome. Yeah, that's something that really changes the dynamic of the game, but the vast majority of these simply do not work in that particular way. And I do find the gating to be fairly irritating, to say the least, because a lot of it's really specific. Like, oh, I've got to reach Karma level 4 in order to be able to sprint forever. You know, this is a useful thing that could, frankly, make my gaming experience a lot better, but I've got to reach Karma level 4, which really relies on running into Karma events or finding a lot of Marnie wheels in order to actually do it. Do I... it just seems like unnecessary busy work, and a lot of Ubisoft open world games seem to be just chock full of unnecessary busy work, and it's just a shame. I like to get access to useful stuff fairly early, and I like the more exotic stuff to be available later on. I don't see the problem in that. It seems to make a perfect sense, but according to Ubisoft, it does not. Now, you might be noticing, by the way, as we go and do this mission, that the game doesn't look particularly good right now. Well, I had to disable mipmaps in order to get rid of the annoying hitching, which has resulted in having some really nasty-looking textures. And it's either that I'll have the frame rate consistently drop and make my game less enjoyable than it previously was. Let's just put it that way. Well, needless to say, I prefer less frame rate hitching. And as a result, that's what I'm going for. God damn it, these things actually move quickly, don't they? This sniper rifle is maybe not the ideal way of taking these guys down. So I must apologize for these terrible textures. I will say that their textures generally look a lot better than this. It is simply as a result of having to deal with this mipmap problem. And this is something they gotta change. They need to patch this. I don't know if it's driver related. I assume it's not, because I think it's happening on AMD as well. So it's clearly something that they need to patch. I mentioned that for the most part, the PC port was fine, and I stand by that. It's mostly fine, but the parts that aren't fine are really bad. They're not as bad as Unity. I mean, the game doesn't crash anywhere near as often as Unity, for instance. The game doesn't have huge AI problems and frequent drops in frame rate. For the most part, I'm staying at about 60 to 90 FPS, so it generally feels pretty good once you've got rid of the hitching there, but good lord. It's a real mess in that regard. Now, what about the story? Well, you end up in this region of Karat to go and scatter your mother's ashes, who has some relationship to Karat, as you learn fairly quickly. I hate this. What? I'm sorry, I'm just gonna go off on this tangent for a second. Why exactly is this unlocked and yet the prerequisite not? How does this make any sense? Ring 2 bells of enlightenment in Shangri-La. Come off it. Come on. This is unnecessary busy work. Anyway, back to the point. So you end up in Karat, you meet the antagonist, who is very interesting, then you get taken away from the antagonist, who is by no means as interesting, and then you get introduced to the Golden Path, which is a terrorist/freedom fighter organization. Occasionally you'll be contacted by the antagonist in a very similar way to the way Handsome Jack worked in Borderlands 2, and I've got to say it's equally effective. In fact, I'd say maybe it's more effective because he's better written. The antagonist, Pagan Min, in this game is outstanding in terms of both the delivery and the way that he's written. Absolutely fantastic, as far as I am concerned. I have no complaints about him. I have complaints about a lot of the other characters, though. Unfortunately, the two allies that you've got, the two main leaders of the Golden Path, frequently at odds in a very binary way, and occasionally it comes through really well in the writing. The female leader character, Amita, makes an impassioned argument for turning Karat into a drug state, and surprisingly enough, it actually sounds reasonable. Although the argument that she made previous to that was less so. So every now and again, they make some good points, but they're unfortunately very one-dimensional and fairly boring characters that would seem like they were deliberately set up to be the binary morality choices that you're supposed to make, and you have to either ally with one of them or the other in certain situations. There's so-called balance of power missions, which I like. I think the addition of balance of power missions is great because it does make it feel like you're in this area for a reason. You're involved in the Golden Path for a good reason, and you might not necessarily agree with everything that's going on, but you feel like way too much of a goddamn delivery boy. The main character has no personality of his own. He's a pair of trousers, essentially, that you slip into. If you asked me to define the main character, I couldn't do it for you. 7 hours or so into the game, I cannot give you a single defining characteristic of this guy. He is utterly generic in every way. And while Far Cry 3 may have certainly failed on the character development front, and oh god, it did, you know, moving on from spoiled college kid to elite hunter and warrior of the jungle in about the course of an hour, this game doesn't even try and do that. Right? This guy comes in with a ridiculous skill set and just seems to be sort of going through the motions. Like, he doesn't object to anything that's going on. It's like, yeah, I'll totally do that. It's like, I'm here to scatter my mother's ashes, and somehow now I am the hero of a terrorist movement or whatever, or freedom fighter movement, for no real reason whatsoever. And somehow I have the ability to do all this crazy stuff. There's no learning going on there. I'm just that good. I am a god, essentially, in human form. For some reason. I couldn't tell you why. The game never tries to justify it, and I think to some degree that's good, but simultaneously, it's not able to escape from the problems of just needing to try and be taken more seriously than it really is. Thank you. Early on in the game, the antagonist says kind of one of the best things that I can possibly imagine when it comes to dealing with a Far Cry game. And it's like, yeah, let's just go tear some shit up. Just straight up says that. And that, to me, is fantastic. You want to know why I think that's fantastic? I'll give you a good reason. I'm going to replace this with this. This looks like it'll be more useful. There we go. The reason that's fantastic is because that's all Far Cry 3 has ever really been about anyway. And yet, it pretends to be more than it really is. Now, Far Cry 3 had some interesting ideas in the sense that you could interpret it as all being very much a drug-fueled sort of rampage. And this idea that the drugs that the main character was taking were very much altering his perspective. And that's a really interesting idea. And I think the drug sections in that game were some of the best. They're actually kind of brave, to some degree, to really go down that route. And they made some very interesting segments as a direct result. But, simultaneously, it's still kind of an excuse, really, isn't it? Because they're trying to make it out like it's somehow more serious than it really is, and it's not just some kind of action movie rampage through hundreds and hundreds of people. Now, at the start of this game, they try and make it out like, yes, this is some action movie rampage through hundreds of people. If Pagan Min is to be believed. And then simultaneously, the Golden Path comes along and says, no, 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 you've got to care about our cause. You've got to care about all of these dead, innocent people. It's very hard to do that. You are a mass murderer. There's no real escaping from that. And I'm okay with that. I just prefer more silliness to couch it in. There's a reason why Saints Row gets to get away with this stuff and other games don't. Because it realizes just how silly it is. And Far Cry still tries to take itself so damn seriously from time to time. It has its moments of comic relief, and I'm very much appreciative of that. Pagan Min is constant comic relief. He's just a great, compelling, interesting character. The guy on the radio is frequently very entertaining as well, although more often than not, you end up in the situation where you find him just irritating because he's far too repetitive. And then when you're dealing with the main cast of characters, they're so goddamn serious about everything, and it just doesn't gel for me. It very much grinds. They grind against each other. There's this constant battle going on between the obvious, ludicrous nature of this particular world and how seriously everyone within it seems to be bloody taking it. It's a bit of a problem. I think it's something that they're going to have to learn to address. And I think just going full-on insane is the right move. And the setting helps in that, because the setting is very otherworldly. This is not the sort of setting that a great deal of games try and take on. And I appreciate that this game does try and take on a different setting. And I think we do need to move away from Tropical Island. We do need to move away from settings that are just overused. And Far Cry, honestly, has done a great job of trying to differentiate. You had 2 tropical islands. You then had Africa, which was really cool and interesting. And now you have the sort of Himalayan region, which is, again, also very interesting. And you're going to run into even things like different designs of car and truck that you don't generally see in other games. And maybe you'll see weapons that you don't see in other games as well, because they're repurposed for use. You got the good old AK, but you've got a lot of, say, Russian weaponry. You've got old World War II weaponry in there. There's an MG42 in the game. That in itself is pretty cool. I appreciate that. I'm glad that I'm not with the same bloody M4 and the same goddamn sniper rifles and the same goddamn shotguns. Things feel old and utilitarian, and I appreciate that. Although you can still stick state-of-the-art reflex sights on pretty much everything. So it's always worth bearing that in mind. The setting's awesome. It really is. I absolutely appreciate it. And I think it's the setting that really has kept me going. Because otherwise, this game is Far Cry 3. it has the addition of co-op, which I would love to tell you about, but it's never worked for me. I've tried. And people keep joining the game and then they just leave instantly. So the way that it works is you can not in this mission, but in side missions, you can summon in people through co-op, or you can offer to help someone in their co-op mission. And you kind of drop into their game, and then you go and fight, and it's kind of fun because, of course, one can drive, and the other one can shoot out the window, or use the mounted gun, or you can fly the helicopters around, and it's helpful to have another person along with you, certainly. There's no doubt about that. There's a little bit of fun involved in that, but it's still the same game, ultimately. I think that it's a game that definitely needed some form of co-op, and I think the way that they've implemented it is fairly solid. They just said, look, it's going to be drop in, drop out. That's simply going to be the way that it works, and it's not going to be something that you commit to with a bunch of different people and say, hey, I'm going to play with these guys for hours. It's sort of like, hey, I'm going to ask the internet for help, and someone's going to join, and then we're going to blow some stuff up, and then they're going to leave. I can appreciate that. I think that's a decent enough way of doing things. No doubt about that. But it just hasn't worked for me. People just keep instantly leaving every time. Maybe they just don't like my face. It's all possible. It's all possible. So I don't really have a huge amount to say about it other than the fact that I'm kind of glad that it's there. I think that the setting does a really good job of, to the best of its ability, disguising the fact that this is an identical game to the last Far Cry. And you know what? I mean, that's okay. This once. You know, I think that it's okay this once, because Far Cry 3 was really, really good, and then we had Blood Dragon, which was a bit more of a directed experience that kind of went full-on wacky. You know, that's a game that just indulged the fact that it was stupid, and I could appreciate Blood Dragon as a result of that more than I can Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 4. And hopefully they do something kind of similar with Far Cry 4 as well. That I would very much enjoy. But you are still playing the same game, with more bells and whistles. They have added and refined certain mechanics. What I will say is the world feels a bit more alive than it did in Far Cry 3, and the reason is that it's got these sort of random karma missions. It's very similar to the way that games like Red Dead Redemption did things. This doesn't seem like a good idea at all. Oh, we're going in. Good that he doesn't notice how freezing the water is. There we go. So, again, yeah, very much kind of Red Dead Redemption sort of thing. It's like random events will happen. These are karma events. Go save this person. And it's kind of time limited. And there's a decent variety of them. And there's a lot of side missions. And some of them suck. Like, I hate the assassination missions because they're often set up in a way that you're not allowed to alert anybody to your presence. So it ends up being a gigantic pain in the arse. And I guess I should have popped up for air at some point. It ends up being a gigantic pain in the arse because you can accidentally just set off the, well, not even so much set off the alarm, but well, we'll give it a try. We'll give it a try anyway. It's very much a case of, if someone sees you, that's it, you're done. You are just done. What the hell? Now I can't see. What the hell is going on here? You want to try this again? Why is everything suddenly white? I can't see a damn thing. Oh, hello. No. I think it's broken. I think it might be broken. I'm just going to fast travel out of this area and go and do something else, because this seems like a terrible idea. Of course it's not. Well, we found another technical problem the game has, guys. It's now completely white, and we're going to drown and die, which is just lovely. But there you go. But outside of things like the assassination missions, there's some fun stuff going on there. There's plenty of nice, interesting side activities. There's plenty to do. If what you like doing involves climbing and shooting, because the game's got a lot of that. What I will say is the game does a good job of... Oh, come off it. Please tell me it's not broken this time. Well, this is nice. Screw it. I guess we are abandoning this mission entirely, because this is terrible and doesn't work properly. That's just great. There are better ways of moving around the world. Far Cry 3 had a wingsuit that you could get very late on in the game. Well, this time around, you get a wingsuit very, very quickly in the game. And it's a lot of fun. It's a mountainous region. It's an ideal region for a wingsuit. And it's so much fun to use, and it lets you traverse areas very quickly. And I would go as far as to say that it's just more fun than traversing the area via driving. In fact, I would suggest that where possible, you simply do not drive, because it's just a lot more fun not to. Really, it is. It's a lot more fun not to drive where you can. It's more fun to fly. You can get in a little repurposed helicopter thingy. You can wingsuit around the place. You can parachute. You can even climb up mountains using a grapple in preset locations. These are much more fun things to do than simply driving around, and I think you'll run into a lot more interesting stuff. You'll find more treasure chests, which unfortunately are really boring. The way they do loot in this game, just like Far Cry 3, is kind of dull. They contextualize it by saying, oh yeah, you found a maxi pad, which apparently is somehow incredibly valuable in this particular country. You found this. You found that, but you didn't really. I mean, you just found a piece of text that then sells for a certain amount of money. It's not like you can really do anything with the loot. You can't craft any of it into something interesting. There's no weapon crafting in the game. The only crafting is, of course, holsters right here, bags, basically, and you can also craft different syringes, which are inexplicably done in a different way. I don't really know why that is. You craft syringes, Samurai, by holding Q and then holding the right mouse button, and then you gain access to these. The healing syringes auto-craft, which is actually kind of handy. But outside of that, you do it this way, which is, again, a little bit wonky. I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Oh. Was that slightly excessive? It's Far Cry. I think that's the way that we're supposed to be doing things. There we go. It's a lot of fun to just ride around or fly around the world and do cool stuff, frankly. And that's where Far Cry is at its best. When you're just going from place to place and you find little areas that you didn't know about previously, and you end up getting some really cool stuff or just finding a really cool mission or character. It doesn't happen as often as I would like, unfortunately. For some reason, it seems like I haven't actually done the Karma event. Don't know why that is, but there you go. Seems like there's a body I need to loot, but I can't find him anywhere. Oh, well. Oh, no, he's there. There we go. All right. That should do the trick. Lovely. And then we'll go drive this truck off to where it needs to be. It's a fun world to explore. But it's impossible to escape just how similar it is to Far Cry 3. And I think if we're going to see Far Cry 5, that's where I think we need to start seeing some real changes. Because otherwise, it's going to become Assassin's Creed again. And I think that this game gets away with it a bit better because it happens to be an open world first-person shooter and there aren't all that many of them, but we've had like 17,000 games in the Assassin's Creed series, so people are getting very sick of that combat system. But I think it's easier to get sick of a counter-based combat system as opposed to just a first-person shooter. We've been playing first-person shooters for decades and we still like shooting people in the face. As long as the guns feel good and there's a good enough variety of guns available, then I think we end up enjoying first-person shooters. And open-world first-person shooters give you a good amount of freedom as to how you approach particular areas. And this game still has that in spades. How do you approach an outpost? It's kind of up to you. You want to go in guns blazing, you want to sneak around, you want to stab people, you want to shoot them with arrows. All of this stuff is entirely up to you. You do whatever the hell you please, and the game will, for the most part, just let you do that. I would love to unlock this, but apparently, yet more gating in this respect. You know, I haven't tried this out. I think this is actually like a digital deluxe or DLC weapon. The review copy they gave us had that, but I'd like to try this weapon out. I'm just kind of curious as to how it works. And I think we can just replace the sniper rifle with that. There we go. We run around with a lot of explosives here. This is the elephant gun. Looks something like this. Not great texture work right now, probably to do with mip maps and nonsense like that, but this should be a fun weapon to use. If you're looking for more Far Cry, this is more Far Cry. It's really that simple. Do I think that it's perfect? Absolutely not. I mean, I put this on the same level as Far Cry 3, honestly. There's obvious little refinements here and there, just in the way that certain missions work, just in the fact that they've added an auto drive to certain parts of the road, which means that you can focus either on shooting, or if you just want to go to a destination, you don't have to necessarily worry about driving yourself. I mean, this can be, like, reasonably important in a game like this, frankly, because... Oh, okay. Maybe the elephant gun might work a little bit better here. Oh, I forgot. The elephant gun's actually not a sidearm, so I can't do that. There we go. The grenade launcher is. Auto drive is a nice little function. You don't have to use it, but it's nifty if you want to just get from place to place without too much hassle. Looks like we found another Karma event. But like I said, the world feels reasonably alive, and I can kind of dig that. And I like the way that the NPCs react to you. They recognize you based on your achievements. They thank you. They do the sort of things that I would kind of expect them to. They panic when wild animals come near. They will warn you about things like eagles coming to eat your face off. They will engage against enemy soldiers if that becomes relevant. And then things like that sometimes happen, and it's very, very strange. Then there are times when the NPCs don't react appropriately at all to what's going on, and this, of course, would be one of them. If you don't mind, I'm going to loot the bodies of your fallen comrades for toothpicks, because such is the way of it. Although, that's kind of cool. I like the way that he's going over to kind of check the body and see what's going on. What I will say is great mocap work and great voice acting really do help this game out an awful lot. On maximum graphics, the facial animation looks fantastic. Obviously, I've had to tweak it a little bit to get the performance going, and hopefully that'll all be fixed in a patch. And special mention again has to be given to Pagan Min, who just is a phenomenal antagonist. He's so much fun. Although, the plot is just like, it's riddled with holes. It doesn't make any sense how Pagan Min is completely okay with me supposedly helping the Golden Path. It's not, the fact that he's not mad that I, like, burned down his opium fields or anything along those lines, I mean, that makes very little sense. And even the kind of start of the game where you escape from his little kind of castle area, there was this opportunity for the Golden Path just to kill him immediately, and they just don't do it for no apparent reason. It all feels kind of contrived, but I think that you've got to contrive a story like this because it's an open world shooter. It doesn't make any goddamn sense otherwise. Even then, though, it has its own problems trying to be taken seriously, and I think I want to see. I'm going to use this term because I love this term, and it's a term that doesn't get used all that much anymore. It's an old term, and that's gay abandon. I would like to see it throw the storyline out the window with gay abandon and just say, look, this is silly! Indulge in the silliness. Oh, go all Saints Row on us. I'm okay with that. In fact, I think I would much prefer that you did that versus what you are currently doing, which is by no means, as far as I'm concerned, as interesting. Would I recommend buying it at the moment? Well, no. And the reason is the technical problems. Like, they're so damn widespread. You cannot ignore them. They are right there, and they need to be resolved. I think once they're fixed, yeah, the port will be fine, for the most part. It's got things like field of view, it's got rebindable keys, although, again, those rebindable keys are by no means perfect. Definitely worth noting that. They are by no means perfect. I think I blew myself up. It looks... Yes. Yes, it would appear that I did. Did I at least get the convoy in the process? No idea. It's now disappeared off the map. Well, that's disappointing. Well, there you go. It doesn't run well enough to justify a full-priced release right now. You can see all of the terrible popping and things, which is mostly due to the fact that I disabled MIP maps, but even with those on, there's still issues of popping here and there. There is still plenty of technical hitching here and there. I've run into problems where I've got stuck in walls. You just saw a bug there where, for some reason, the entire ice cave was washed out white, so I couldn't actually see where I was going and drowned to death. Those are the sort of things that shouldn't be in a full-price $60 release, and this year has maybe been one of the worst. Absolute worst when it comes to dealing with just horrible bugs and unnecessary tosh that shouldn't be in full-priced releases. This is the sort of thing that professional studios should be able to handle by now, and they can't. I don't know why. They're releasing games far too early, they're rushing the bloody things out, and Far Cry 4... Oh, God! Far Cry 4 definitely feels rushed, just not as much as Unity. But frankly, it's like it's trying to achieve less than Unity is. So I can almost kind of feel sorry for Unity because it aimed to make this giant, seamless city with massive crowds of people that people had never seen before, and it was let down on the technical side of things, but like as an artistic achievement, Unity is actually quite impressive. Far Cry 4 is as well, but I think it's mostly just down to its setting, more so than anything else. It looks marginally better than Far Cry 3 does, but I think the setting with the backdrop of the Himalayan mountains and the lighting really makes it look better, but I think like that's almost a smokescreen for a game that is technically quite similar. It does have some nice additions if you happen to be using an Nvidia card. The way that the flags flap in the breeze is very impressive to look at. But under all of that, it is inescapable that this is just a Far Cry game in the same way that Far Cry 3 was a Far Cry game. And for me, it's okay. I've been having fun with it, because I think I did feel like I wanted a bit more Far Cry. And that's going to be a very subjective thing. Like, I don't want more Assassin's Creed. I don't want more Borderlands. These are things that I think need to change. I need to become better, because they have sort of outstayed their welcome. I don't think Far Cry has done that yet, But of course, that's going to be entirely subjective. Some of you are going to say, well, damn, I mean, I wanted Far Cry 3 to be different. You might be the same as me with Borderlands, where I have, like, there's a set of mechanics and design philosophies that I don't like when it comes to Borderlands, and as a result, I criticize those and I kind of want them changed. With Far Cry, it might be very similar for you, so you've got to take all of this information in context. Do you want another Far Cry 3? Because that's what this is. It's got more bells and whistles on it, it's got more guns, it's got more mobility. Right off the bat, it's in a different setting, with a different antagonist, but it's still the same Far Cry, all things considered. I think this is maybe the last time that I'd want to see a Far Cry game do this. In Far Cry 5, which will invariably come in, I want to see it do different things. That simple, really. I want to see it vary things up. I don't think there's anything harmful in asking that. Because really, why do people like Far Cry? Is it because it's an open-world FPS? Probably. It can still be an open-world FPS. It's just it can do things differently. Maybe it could toss out the radio towers. Oh, I think we're all kind of sick of climbing towers at this point. Maybe it could get rid of the hunting system, or it could change the way that the hunting system actually works. Maybe it could put a meaningful crafting system in, rather than this arbitrary production line where you need a certain set of pelts in order to make a certain weapon harness, but the previous weapon harness didn't require those pelts. I mean, that's a thing that makes no sense, right? You've got your third and fourth weapon harnesses are identical. They do exactly the same thing. They carry a primary, and yet one requires a different set of pelts than the other. Why? Because video games. There's so much more that could be done with the hunting system. You could end up in a situation where you have to actually quell the local population of a certain kind of animal because they're actually actively attacking a village, and they might end up taking it over, and there might be something dynamic about that. It has some dynamic stuff, like if you're in the range of a fortress that is still occupied by the enemy, any outpost that you've liberated is at risk of counterattack, and that feels very dynamic. And they've done a good job in that respect of making the world feel like there's an ongoing conflict that may or may not happen without you. Although, still, like, it's always up to AJ to save the day, and it's a little bit of a shame that it always comes down to that. I suppose it's the inescapable protagonist problem, where you are the hero that saves the day, and that's really just an inescapable fact when it comes to a first-person shooter. I would love to see Far Cry attempt to try and get away from that. And to some degree they do, with the guns for hire and co-op ideas. They're like, yeah, you're not the only capable person in the world, but even then, it's still got the same problems that Far Cry 3 had, assuming you even view those as problems. Some people are not going to view those as problems. Some people are going to view those as enjoyable game elements. And that's cool. I'm fine with that. Because the game's still fun at the end of the day, you know? You're still blowing up large numbers of people with a handheld grenade launcher. You're still running people over in a tiny three-wheeled whatever the hell this thing is. You're still wingsuiting in from above, dropping grenades, throwing bait to attract leopards and tigers to your cause, you know, riding an elephant in. There's plenty of great fun moments in this game. Please do not assume that I don't like it. I do like it. I do like Far Cry 4, outside of the technical aspects. I'd like it better if the technical aspects were bloody fixed. But this is still a game where a flying, flaming Bengal tiger just whooshes past your ear, and that's entirely normal. And that's lovely. Go further than that. Now, let's see more of that kind of stuff. Let's just try and get away from the idea that Far Cry has ever really been something that can work seriously. I mean, maybe it can. If you went down the Far Cry 2 route, maybe, yeah, maybe it can be played straight. But I'd prefer not to see Far Cry played straight. I'd prefer... Wow, that gun's actually pretty good. I'd prefer it to be played in the Saints Row style. I prefer it to be fundamentally silly in every possible way that it could be. And right now, it's fighting. It's got this internal conflict within it, where half of it's trying to be silly, and then the other half just can't abandon the idea that they need well-written, serious characters, and a real peril, and a political struggle, and... I mean... It's really what Pagan Min said at the start of the game. Let's just go fuck some shit up. That's all Far Cry really is. Let's stop pretending that it's anything more than that. Could it be more than that? Well, maybe, but certainly not doing it this way. Yeah, I'm still murdering hundreds of people. And it's still a hell of a lot of fun, I gotta admit. And that's still quite the beautiful vista. So if you want to know more about the technical side of things, do go watch my port report. All my opinions there kind of haven't changed, although I've noticed more bugs as I've played further. I don't recommend picking this up at full price before they manage to fix most of these bugs. Once they've done that, it is a worthy successor to Far Cry 3 that really doesn't do an awful lot to distinguish itself from Far Cry 3. It is improved in a very iterative way. They added more stuff. It's a very, very safe way of doing things. Very, very safe indeed. It's a little bit shame, because I think Far Cry has the potential to really take a risk. It's a shame that Ubisoft doesn't seem to be the sort of people right now that are willing to do that. Yeah, I really do think that Far Cry could afford to take a risk. Hopefully in the next one. It's not that Far Cry in its current state isn't a fun game to play, it absolutely is, but is it going to be a fun game the 4th or 5th time around? I think that's a little bit more debatable, isn't it? That's the sort of thing that we might have a little bit more of a problem with. That's the time when it becomes Assassin's Creed, and ideally do not want to see this game become Assassin's Creed. I really, really do not. We have had quite enough of the Assassin's Creed nonsense, thank you very much. We do not need another generic series using the same mechanics over and over and over again, to the point of ad nauseum. We don't need that. I don't want that, and I sincerely hope that that's not what Far Cry becomes. But for the time being, Far Cry 4 is a solid entry to the franchise. It's a lot of fun, it's got a lot going on, there's a lot of things to do, the story is questionable, the writing is a mixed bag, to say the least. And if you can discard how just flat-out serious the game is trying to pretend that it is, then I think that you will have a good time, especially if you happen to have a co-op partner. Because there are plenty of awesome moments to enjoy. Far Cry 4, ladies and gentlemen. Currently available on next-gen consoles and on PC for $60 or your regional equivalent. I should mention, it's got Day 1 DLC. Of course it does. I did the Day 1 DLC mission because it happened to come with the review thing, copy. You're not missing much. The mission sucks. It's not a good mission. It's a waste of time. I don't know what the hell's going to be going on with the Season Pass, frankly, but I personally don't care enough about it for it to really be a factor when it comes to a purchase decision. It's a shame that Ubisoft continually goes down this particular route, but they do. I haven't tried the 5v5 multiplayer. I might do that in another video. I might just ignore it, because it seems very much like a throwaway mode. A lot of people are saying that at the moment, but it might be worth an investigation. We will see. Far Cry 4, ladies and gentlemen. There you go. That's my impression on it. I certainly hope that they patch and fix the technical problems, then I'll be enjoying the game a lot more than I currently am. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.